Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our free Thursday webinar. I'm Nikki Jovicic from LookUpStrata, and I'm also the Managing Director of Tower Body Corporate in Queensland, and I'm your host today. Following the significant impact of ex-tropical Cyclone Alfred on southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales, we know that many strata communities are facing considerable challenges, and this includes navigating insurance claims, dealing with repair delays, and facing general uncertainty about the recovery process. So today we have a great panel of experts joining us to provide essential insights for strata communities as they navigate the aftermath of the cyclone. Our panellists, Bruce McKenzie from Sedgwick, Tyrone Shandiman from Strata Insurance Solutions, and Will Marquand from Tower Body Corporate, are here to help owners, committees and strata managers understand their responsibilities and the steps involved in recovery. So during the session, we'll cover several key areas, including how insurance claims are tracking and the common challenges being faced. And as the Insurance Council of Australia reported, insurers have already received a significant number of claims following ex-tropical Cyclone Alfred, and this number is expected to rise. So this webinar is a vital opportunity for you to gain clarity during this challenging and possibly frustrating time. So we're here to help you navigate the recovery process. As LookUpStrata takes our transparency responsibilities seriously regarding partnerships, I'd like to mention that both Sedgwick and Strata Insurance Solutions have been long-time sponsors of LookUpStrata. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, in addition to owning LookUpStrata, I also own Tower Body Corporate. So before we begin, I'd like to mention that the information in this session, including discussions arising from submitted questions and chat conversations, is not advice and should not be relied upon as advice, and you should seek independent advice before acting on the information contained in this session. Now, today we welcome Bruce McKenzie. Bruce is the National Manager for Commercial Services and Major Projects at Sedgwick, with over 30 years' experience in building construction and project management. He's a licensed building contractor and qualified supervisor with a deep understanding of building defects and remediation. So Bruce has held leadership roles in major building safety programs, including Cladding Safety Victoria and Project Intervene in New South Wales. And we also welcome Tyrone Shandiman from Strata Insurance Solutions back with us. So Tyrone is a seasoned professional in the insurance industry. He embarked on his journey in 2004 within the financial services sector, and in 2011 he established Strata Insurance Solutions, transforming a garage startup into a reputable firm focused on strata insurance and servicing over 700 clients. Tyrone's role extends beyond managing operations and tackling complex insurance matters. He also founded the Australian Consumer Insurance Lobby, which focuses on consumer rights within the strata industry. His efforts and expertise have been acknowledged with numerous industry awards, including being recently named an Australian top brokerage by Insurance Business Australia magazine. And we welcome back Will Marquand. Will joined the Tower Body Corporate team as a General Manager and Senior Strata Manager in 2020. A licensed strata manager, he has widespread experience across all forms of commercial, industrial and residential schemes. A former journalist and teacher, Will is also a regular contributor to LookUpStrata as a writer and a webinar figure, and he believes in proactive, ethical strata management. He hopes to provide Tower's customers with the knowledge and support required to take their schemes forward into the next generation of body corporate management. So we welcome Bruce, Tyrone and Will. So maybe Bruce, you could give us an overview to begin with.
Thanks, Nikki. Look, in the Sedgwick business, naturally we've seen quite a high influx of claims come through the business. My area is building consultancy in the business, so certainly the experts in my team have been deployed all over various regions to assess damage. Some of the things we'll cover off on is the differentiation between maintenance and damage, and certainly that is something that's come up on a lot of buildings where the experts will take a closer look at that. So that's probably one of the things that we've considered the most, and in the areas where the cyclone has hit, particularly Gold Coast and places like that, it is acknowledged we do have some ageing buildings, some that maybe lack a bit of maintenance. So there's been potentially a little bit of damage there that maybe could have been prevented with a little bit of maintenance. So we can cover off on those things when we get to it, but that's probably what we're seeing the most. And naturally, a lot of water inundation, particularly in the Class 2 buildings or strata buildings. We're seeing a lot of water inundation, balconies, balcony doors, basement car parks, and of course the typical impact damage you would expect. So that's trees, furniture, that sort of thing, impacting the buildings, rooftops, and that sort of thing. So generally, that's what we're seeing. It's probably a little bit more than what we've seen in previous cyclones. Just given the nature of this one, it's quite significant.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for that overview, Bruce and Tyrone. If you could jump in and give us an idea of what you're seeing and what's happening in your area.
I thought I might just start by saying, thankfully, this cyclone crossed the coast as a low. It had been predicted as a Category 2 cyclone, and this could have been a lot worse than what it is. Now, there are over 60,000 claims since I last checked, and the Treasurer yesterday estimated a damage bill of $1.7 billion. So the 2022 flood event had a $6 billion repair bill. Thankfully, the claim was not as bad as it could have been. And it's about a quarter of the 2022 storm. So I think there is some capacity or better capacity for insurers than past events. We have a cyclone reinsurance pool, as some of your listeners may have heard of in the past. How does this impact your policy? The truth of the matter is it's an agreement between the pool and insurers. It's like a wholesale arrangement. Your policy that applies to you will apply to your claim, and it has no impact. It's a reinsurance arrangement in itself. I think Bruce touched on maintenance issues from an insurance perspective. You have two types of claims. One is related to damage, but in claims where there's a heavy deluge of water, you can have maintenance issues that cause the water to ingress into the property. For example, you might have some cracking tiles or things that weren't damaged by the storm that need to be fixed as part of maintenance. And typically those type of things aren't covered under a strata insurance policy. But your water damage side can be considered in certain instances. I know that Bruce will probably attest to this, but in these types of claims, there can often be some significant challenges in finding leaks, and that can cause quite a level of frustration as well, particularly when you've got high winds and you've got a building where you can't find the source of the leak because it was just wind-driven rain that entered the building, where in normal conditions it would not have impacted the building. So insurers will often want a building to fix a leak before they commence repairs. But sometimes that can be very challenging, and sometimes it will land on an expert saying, well, actually, it was just the circumstances. There's nothing necessarily wrong with this building. Thankfully, as well, we didn't see the flooding and storm surge events that we were expecting, but I thought I might just cover off on a couple of the common exclusions you will see in a policy. Now, it's important to know that the insurance policy covers sudden and accidental damage. Other than that, excluded. Now, some policies will have a flood exclusion, which is the covering of normally dry land with water released or that has escaped from the normal confines of any watercourse, river, lake, creek, reservoir, canal, or dam. In this case, it would be the Brisbane River or some of the southern rivers as well. Storm surge, also not covered in most policies. However, some have write-backs, but it's typically the covering of normally dry coastal land by water as a result of wind or low atmospheric pressure caused by a storm. So it's effectively a high tide, and the wind pushes the water up onto the land. All right, so common strata insurance issues post-cyclone. You can definitely insure for damage and financial loss associated with an insurance claim. One thing that no insurance policy can ever insure against is delays and inconvenience. Now, experienced in the 2022 claims that some properties had repairs that took up to a year or even longer to repair. While the policy will cover financial losses associated with loss of rent or accommodation costs, there are going to be delays in these events, and we like to set very clear expectations with clients up front. that they can expect that there will be delays. Can you organise your own repair? The short answer is yes, you can. It's always recommended that you speak to your insurance broker or insurer before you go ahead and take repairs, unless if it's an urgent repair where you need to do so to minimise loss under the policy. Now, in major catastrophic events, insurers are a little bit more amenable to people organising their own repairs, and sometimes doing that can be a little bit cheaper in some cases and a little bit faster, depending on supply and demand with insurers builders like Sedgwick. Now, the biggest challenge that we find as well, and I'm sure will speak to this, is that in Strata, it's not one policyholder that you're dealing with often, and we've got a claim at the moment with about 50 lots that have got water inundation through their roof. This can be challenging and you know, pose challenges for the repairers, the assessors, the claims managers, and so on. That you need to have a really good process in place for dealing with multi-lot owners, multi-lot claims. Thankfully, a lot of the Strata insurers have assessors that have processes in place for that. Lastly, I just wanted to mention, Nikki, that you said that we're not looking at specific examples today. I always like to offer LookUpStrata that if any reader has a real problem, I'm more than happy for them to make contact with me. You know, my business isn't just about winning clients; it's actually about helping people as well. So if anyone has any challenges that they're facing, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to have a chat with you and give you some free advice around that for LookUpStrata members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tyrone. That's fantastic that that you've got that offer there for people, and we'll share your contact details when we send the recording out later on today with everybody. So please feel free to reach out to Tyrone. I know he's helped our readers in the past, and we really appreciate that as well. Okay, we might just go to Will now. If you could give us an idea, Will, from a Strata manager's perspective, what are you seeing particularly on the Gold Coast, but also up in Brisbane as well?
Yeah, these weather events are extremely stressful for owners. Their homes have been damaged, their lives are impacted, and of course they want everything to return to normal as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, it's not very easy to do that, and that means that you have a lot of quite stressed owners out there who are concerned about what to do next and looking for answers for what to do next. In that scenario, they tend to turn to their body corporate managers, so their stress gets transplanted to body corporate offices. And I can tell you that my office, and I'm pretty sure every body corporate office across Southeast Queensland, has been a pretty stressful place for the last couple of weeks, with like a huge volume of emails and calls being received, and managers trying to negotiate those while also dealing with ordinary body corporate business, which has been continuing regardless. It is very, very difficult to navigate all of these problems all at one time. We have to try to triage issues based around importance or what we perceive as their importance, with the understanding that an owner who's calling you on the phone may not understand that their issue may not be as bad, which is very important. Their issue, which is very important to them, may not be as bad as the next phone call that we're taking, or something like that. That makes it hard for owners and brokers as well, and the insurance companies to deal with this kind of problem. What I'd say is that these kind of matters go through phases, and we've probably at the moment just finished phase one, which is the receipt of the knowledge of all of the problems and the reporting of those problems. In its own way, that's perhaps the easiest phase, because I can get an email and I can advise the broker that the claim needs to be made, and that's relatively straightforward. The hard part is really what comes next, which is the amount of time and energy it takes to fix all of these issues. And the reality is that that's going to take a number of months, or perhaps even longer for some owners, until these problems get resolved. What I've seen this year that's maybe been different to other disasters, I guess, that I've been through, is that a lot of insurance policies have significantly increased their excess. $5,000, $10,000 is now fairly common across the state, and that is really impacting the question of whether an owner can make a claim, or whether an issue is claimable. And that's very hard for body corporate managers to answer in advance. But if you're at a scheme where your excess is $10,000, and maybe only one unit has been impacted at that scheme, it may well be that the excess just is too high for your issue to be covered under the body corporate issue, under the body corporate insurance. If you have 10 lots that the scheme that have all been affected, perhaps they can be collated together, and then an insurance claim can be made. But doing that collation is then very difficult work for body corporate managers to do, and you often have to, and it delays the process because you have to wait for all of the issues to be collated rather than dealing with them one at a time. So the extra challenge of the higher excesses this time, I've personally found it quite complicated, and I'm not sure if we have all of the answers ready to deal with it now and in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Will. And before we move into the Q&As, Tyrone, I might just ask you, are you experiencing that same kind of issue that Will's just mentioned about the excesses?
Yeah, look, we are experiencing some issues with excesses. I mean, the one issue that I've come across particularly is some insurers have cyclone excesses in their policy, and the question is, well, the event crossed as a low on the coast, so there has been a bit of back and forth with that particular insurer on the cyclone excess. But going to Will's point, yes, some policies will have excesses and storm excesses or just higher excesses. Typically, if it's below the excess, then the owner is responsible for any repairs inside their lot. If it is above the excess, then if it affects one lot only, the lot owner pays the excess, unless the body corporate determines that it's reasonable in the circumstances to pay for it themselves. And if it's more than 2 lots, then under the legislation, again, there is a lot of flexibility for the committee to make determinations where it's reasonable. But usually the body corporate will pay the excess again, unless if they believe that it is reasonable that one lot owner or a group of lot owners pay that excess.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned about the wording of the event itself, and we've actually been asked, is this insurance event defined as a named cyclone, or was it just a storm?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that comes back to I think that cyclone excess as well. The one thing I will say is that your policy will often define what an event is, okay? In that particular insurer's policy, event had the word damage in it as well, and that's where we're kind of having these discussions of, well, actually, there was no damage happening until the cyclone passed across the coast. So what are you calling an event, and when is the event triggered? So it really, I suppose, it is variable from insurer to insurer. The best thing I could suggest, Gary, who's asking that question, is to get advice from your insurance broker, and ask some further questions about that.
So it really is on a case-by-case basis.
It's on a policy-by-policy basis. Yeah, it's a
Mm-hmm.
policy-by-policy basis. For the cyclone reinsurance pool, it covers damage 48 hours after a cyclone, right? But that's, again, a private reinsurance arrangement, and the provisions of that arrangement don't apply to the consumer.
What advice can you offer to strata committees on effectively communicating with residents throughout the repair process, especially regarding potential delays in the scope of work, and how important is communication during a crisis?
Obviously, it's very important. What is good communication, though, and how do you achieve that's really hard. You would probably say, like, the more you can do, the more you can reach out to people and advise them what's happening, the better off you are. The problem in a crisis like this is you don't want to provide any kind of misinformation, and it's often quite difficult to get very definite information. So that's what people want to hear. What's happening? When's it going to be fixed? How much is it going to cost? But often, if you're a committee or if you're a body corporate manager, you don't always have all of those answers. So you need to be able to sort of reach out to people to say, we are speaking to the insurer, we are speaking, the assessor is planning to come within the next week or so, and you just need to be patient. That kind of communication is very useful to send out, but it may not be enough because people want definite answers that might not be available.
And Tyrone, you've got something to add to that?
So I think if I can just add, communication is a real challenge in these events, and I'm sure, Will, you'll attest to that. When you've got 10 lots, 10 different owners wanting to claim and wanting to know information about their claim, it is important to have a very streamlined process for how you communicate. And I think the best way is to provide regular updates to owners. Now, that can be very challenging for a strata manager that might have, 20, 30 buildings that have got claims, and they're unable to do that. But communication is important. And it's also important to remember it is not the committee's job to manage and facilitate claims. It is not the committee's job. They certainly help, and it's always good when they can work with the strata manager and help. But I think sometimes some owners have an expectation, well, they're our elected representatives, so they have to do everything for us. That's not actually their role. Usually you'll have in our case for our business, we manage the claims on behalf of both the committee and try to do so with the strata manager as well, or for them. But yes, it isn't a committee role, and that's a very important point to make.
So given the widespread damage from ex-tropical Cyclone Alfred, what are some common reasons for delays in the insurance claim assessment and approval process that owners and committees should be aware of, and how can they proactively address these?
Yeah, look, I think like the common reason for delays in the process often, one of the most common things is attending to maintenance issues. So we've got a building that from the 2022 December storms has not been repaired yet because there's outstanding maintenance issues that haven't been attended to. So that's a common thing. If you have a maintenance issue, then obviously get that seen to. I also think that we do get some delays where some owners will lodge claims weeks after, and it doesn't help the process because we send an assessor out immediately, and they've only assessed half of the lots, and then they drip feed in. So for any owner that's wondering, oh, should I just hold off? This isn't urgent, or I don't want to bother Will or Tyrone or whoever. That's actually not a very helpful approach, even though you might have the best intentions. We want to see them as soon as possible so that these assessors can come out and assess the property. And then I'm sure, Bruce, you'd probably attest to this, that a big challenge is just getting access as well. So having very clear access for your builders, your assessors, that's going to help in the process as well.
Our caretaker has taken it upon themselves to send out advice to owners, and based on what Tyrone and Will said, should this not happen and any communication would be best from the body corporate manager, I'm concerned owners may see the information from the caretaker as being correct when it may in fact be incorrect.
Can I just say caretakers can be very helpful in the claim process. They can, in fact, having a really good and proactive caretaker that's there on site to meet assessors, to help owners, to collate all the information. I really, caretakers have a very valuable piece in the claims process. Look, yes, sometimes you will get caretakers that give insurance advice that's probably contrary to what we would say. So yes, I would obviously encourage a caretaker, if there's anything related to a strata management issue or an insurance issue, maybe to run it past the broker or the strata manager before you give specific advice, particularly around policy coverage and going and doing repairs without notifying the insurer and so on. But look, I'll answer that question on the flip side, that caretakers can be an absolute pot of gold in a claim of this nature.
Okay, thanks so much, Tyrone. And just another question from chat, and it mentions you, Tyrone, but I might just throw to you first, Bruce, just saying, could you please provide an example of outstanding maintenance issues that delay assessments and repairs?
Yeah, look, I totally agree with Tyrone. A lot of building managers or caretakers, whichever you want to call them, can be really helpful on a lot of properties that we go to, and collating that information. It is critical, but that they do communicate with, as you said, with the broker or the insurer, or with the strata manager or body corporate manager, because that communication part is critical. And we find as long as that link exists, normally it does flow quite smoothly. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the key things.
I think the common ones are roofing issues. Okay, so just remember that the insurer will cover if the tiles are blown off the roof or blown a sheet off, or there's been something that's been wind driven to cause damage to the roof, then that's not a maintenance issue. But for example, if say over 10 years, tiles have started cracking or things have, within the roof have failed, those type of things need to be attended to. When I talk about the policy that's still dealing with maintenance issues, I must say it's not, these issues are not major issues that needed to be resolved. It was just that, the body corporate just hasn't gotten to them in a timely manner, and it's meant that some owners haven't had their claims resolved.
I heard what Tyrone said, and I agree. Roofing, balconies as well. We often see previous insurance claims where potentially it might have even cash settled on the claim, and there was a promise, if you like, to attend to those issues by the committee and repair, and they haven't undertaken that for various reasons. And that might reoccur again. That certainly does cause delay because when we come to site and do the building assessment, some of those things are quite obvious when you do discover them. So, which I'll cover off on another question, but that's probably one of the key things we see is previous insurance claims that haven't actually been properly rectified yet.
Okay, thank you. And Will, you've got something to add?
Well, I had a question for Bruce, really, which is when you go out to a site, how do you establish that the damage was done, by the cyclone, or whether it was pre-existing? What are you looking for? What makes the difference?
Thanks. Yeah, look, that kind of comes into our next question, Nikki, and I'm happy to go straight into that. I guess the first thing, most committees, body corporate managers, building managers, they're reasonably aware of the existing maintenance and problems within the building. So I'll give some examples. Things like dark stains, the efflorescence you see coming out of balconies, everybody's seen that before, concrete spalling, timber rot, steel corrosion. They're all visible signs that there's been water damage, but none of those things occur from a cyclone within a week or two after the cyclone. They're long-term maintenance things. So they're the telltale signs. As a building consultant, when we do go out to do assessments or even project manage, we look for all the damage that's happened during the cyclone, but our duty of care is to also identify those other things that potentially could have contributed to whether it be water ingress or any other problems. So they're really the things. Mould is always a tricky one. Mould can develop, as everybody knows, particularly in Queensland, can develop within days. It can be complicated sometimes to determine the difference between existing mould and new mould as a result of water inundation. But there are the proper experts that get involved can often determine that. So they're the sorts of things that we would normally unpack to get a clear picture of what does sit in that maintenance area and what potentially may have contributed to further damage because of the reasons of it not being repaired. So they're the things we would normally look out for. But certainly, if you do have existing things on your building, such as steel corrosion, rust, timber rot, those sorts of things, they're ordinarily not going to be accepted as cyclone damage because it's fairly obvious that it's pre-existing.
Thank you, Bruce. And Tyrone, you've got something to add as well?
Yeah, if I can just say, just following on from what Bruce has said, that there can be instances where an assessor or builder goes out and says this wasn't cyclone damage. That doesn't mean it's not necessarily a claim under another event, okay? I will just refer to a webinar that I did. I believe it was in 2022. There was a water damage webinar on your national webinars on the website. If you have any issues around, mold or rotting or slow claims or things like that, I would highly recommend that owners go to that webinar because there can be some tips on how to get your claim considered in those instances. Not everything will be considered, but I think that's really helpful to just mention that.
What are the key pieces of information and documentation that owners and committees should gather and provide to their insurers to support their claims and avoid delays? Should strata schemes lodge a claim even if the full extent isn't known? And what constitutes essential initial documentation?
As ever, clear, concise information is the key, right? So make sure you're very clear about which lot numbers have been affected, or which areas of body corporate property have been affected, the common property. Take photographs, as many as you can, but make sure, I say as many as you can, but make sure you take photographs of the key areas that have been damaged. If you can, compile your list into a spreadsheet or some kind of other document that makes it very clear to the insurer exactly what has happened at your property. One of the properties I'm managing at the moment, they had 20 odd lots damaged, but the owners there, the committee there, have done an excellent job of making a list of every single one, writing down what the problems are, associating photos with it. They've even gone to the extent of creating a map and marking all of the lots that have been damaged. I mean, that's excellent work on the part of that committee, and I expect that their claim will be managed much more smoothly and easily as a result, because when the assessor comes to their site, they're going to know exactly what they're looking for and exactly what they're looking at. If you're just kind of got a bunch of emails and you're trying to work out what's been done where, then you're going to get confusion, because that's kind of the communication to the insurer and to the assessor is not very clear. So the clearer you can make it, the better result that you will get.
Sorry, thanks so much, Will. And Bruce, how helpful is that kind of information for an assessor going out?
Oh, incredibly helpful. And I think the one thing we'll mention, and I'll emphasise this over and over again, is photos. It's critical that everybody can do it. It's free. We know that. We can take them on their phone. They really play a really key role when it comes to that assessment process. And I know often even make safe work is undertaken quickly just to help mitigate loss, or it could be to prevent further water ingress and that sort of thing. If photos can be taken before that work's done and even after that work's done, it really assists in improving the status of what it looked like prior, and it might even help where the water ingress point was. Pooling can dry up in a couple of days, and I'm sure all owners can, relate to the fact of getting an assessor or someone out and saying, well, there was a problem, but I know it doesn't look like it now, and it's incredibly frustrating. So photos help alleviate and support the claim that's being made, particularly to the experts, because they can certainly unpack that and help to quickly dive into certain areas of a building where they may see a problem's occurred, whether it's cyclone related or not. It still needs to be investigated.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. We might go to Tyrone for this one. So in situations where the extent of damage isn't immediately clear and further investigations like exploratory costs is needed, what is the typical process for insurers to approve and manage these investigative works, and how can committees facilitate this?
Yeah, look, if you believe it's going to be an insurance claim, insurers can send their own assessors and builders out to have a look at the issue. And make determinations on the best path forward. So I think in these situations, it's often better to have a professional like Sedgwick or someone who's there guiding the process. Not all exploratory costs are covered. There are write-outs around, certain events. Some insurers won't cover them if the cause was excluded, and then some of them have specific exclusions around the cause. Obviously, if the cause is from cyclone and you've got to explore something, then that could be considered under the policy. So my advice to any of the committees or owners is turn to the professionals, and if you're not sure, there's certainly no harm in lodging a claim. It can be withdrawn later at a later point. And insurers, when they rate on claims histories, they're looking at the dollar figures. So if it's a withdrawn claim, it's probably not going to have as much of an adverse impact than if you've got a major claim on your history.
Okay, thanks so much, Tyrone. This one's for Bruce. So what strategies can strata committees employ to secure reliable and qualified contractors for necessary repairs while ensuring they're working within the scope of their insurance coverage and avoiding issues with unlicensed tradespeople?
Okay. So often insurers, adjusters on larger claims appoint a project manager, or even themselves will appoint a builder off a panel, a pre-approved panel. It's normally someone that's been vetted and pre-approved. So, but it's not uncommon, and I think it might have been Tyrone that mentioned it earlier, it's not uncommon for committees to have a preferred builder, or they want to engage a builder directly to get things moving. So if it occurs, it's really, really important to avoid long-term issues. There's a few sort of short-term things that need to be addressed. I've got a couple of points I've jotted down on this because this is really key. And appointing builders, whilst it might seem simple, it can be quite complicated and it's extremely risky if it's not done the right way. My first piece of advice for everybody here is only appoint a single builder, a principal contractor. Do not appoint multiple trades and expect that you're going to get a result that doesn't come with a single warranty on all of the work. The key there, I know there is a premium to be paid in appointing a builder. It's normally 10 or 20% more than what it would cost you to appoint various trades, but you do not get that single warranty on all the works where you're not going to have various trades blaming each other if something goes wrong later on. So that's probably the first critical bit of advice. Things like ABN license checks, they're all free to do online. It doesn't take much to Google and you'll find the various places that you can do that. To me, that's just you do not pass go if it doesn't pass that test. It's critical to do that check because there's all sorts of implications if you do appoint someone that's not licensed properly. You are going to put yourself at high risk. The third point is maintenance trades or builders that don't necessarily do remedial work are not necessarily suited for this. So don't expect, you might have a builder that's done a bit of maintenance before. Doesn't mean necessarily they're a good fit for remediation work, which can be quite complicated. So I think really just checking references as to whether they've done this kind of remediation work before is really important. Requesting copies of insurance documents, that's fairly standard, but it is forgotten often where owners forget to just access that information and get the comfort that they're insured. And then my final point is builders, they need to price a scope of work that's consistent across the board, that covers all of the things, ensures there's no overlap with maintenance or other issues. Because if you do appoint a builder and they do start going down a pathway and start to lap over into maintenance work and other things, it's going to become quite complicated, particularly in the claim process, where the insurers will want to segregate that out. And if the builder isn't transparent in providing breakdowns and information, it can end up messy. So they're just a few key points. There's 5 there, but a few key points I would certainly recommend owners consider if you were going down that path.
Excellent. Thanks. Great help. Tyrone?
Yeah, if I can just say that one thing that is very important to understand, particularly with your larger claims, if the insurer appoints a builder, they warranty the work. Okay, if you appoint your own, then you have to fight the fight with the builder instead. So that's really important to consider. The second thing I will say, often when you have $1.7 billion of damage, the repair costs for builders when there is high demand and lower supply can be higher than in the months leading up to this event where we hadn't had major catastrophe events. So I do get some concerns by committees saying, oh, well, the insurer's just gone and appointed the most expensive builder or something along those lines. Please know that insurers are looking to minimize their costs as much as possible. They're not looking to appoint the most expensive builder, but it's sometimes repair costs in catastrophic events can just be higher because of the nature of the event.
Okay, wonderful. Will, did you have anything to add to that discussion at all, or?
Not really to that discussion, but what I want to think about is we talked a lot about the immediate response to what happens when we have a weather event like this. But my real question is, what's going to happen next? Whether events are becoming more frequent and more serious. We've already seen in North Queensland that basically a lot of that region is uninsurable or faces significant problems with gaining insurance or significant costs. It seems quite likely that South Queensland is going to face the same issues that North Queensland is going to face within the next, I don't know the timeline, 5, 10, 15 years or something like that. We need to start being realistic about stopping treating these as one-off events and starting to treat them as part of the cycle of the region. Bruce, I guess I've got a question for you in that context, which is, how much of the damage that you've seen from this cyclone would have been preventable if owners had been undertaking more significant maintenance of their building, more preventative maintenance. How much of it was actually just caused by the cyclone and its bad luck? How much of it could be prevented? I know you can't give an exact percentage or anything, but what are we looking at?
Yeah, look, it is a bit difficult to determine that at the moment. I know if we talk about the domestic area on domestic properties, I know that's not specifically strata, but buildings in this pocket where the cyclone hit are generally not designed for this kind of impact because they're not in that North Queensland area, nor have they experienced an event like this. I know these areas we have experienced a lot of hail and a lot of other events, but not so much a high wind event. So things like roof tie down and that, some of those problems have been coming up, but I think generally speaking on strata buildings, there's a mixed bag. We haven't got all of the data and the information back yet, and look, there's still claims to be lodged. To be honest, it's a bit of a slow process on some of these, but certainly the big ones are always things like your balconies and your balcony doors and your hobs and things like that, where previous membranes have leaked, they might have leaked again or inundated inside because the drainage wasn't adequate on the balcony, the hob wasn't high enough, there was a problem with the window. Those sorts of things do present very regularly. They're probably the most common, particularly with the buildings facing, the direction where the wind and the rain is coming from. So that's probably one of the more common ones, and it's one of the ones that some of the aging buildings are really struggling to get to addressing because it's expensive. And there was a period there where, balcony hobs and different things weren't done correctly, or perhaps the builder hadn't addressed it properly at the time of construction, and now it's an inherent problem for the owners. So, and other usual, problems are your rooftops, and that's a combination of whether it be a metal roof, a tile roof, or even a membrane roof. Often, as we pointed out earlier in one of the questions, some of those problems hadn't been previously addressed, and there's a bit of a path, I guess, in terms of the information that becomes available, and you understand that it might have been preventable had the fix on the roof or the membrane or whatever it was been done 3 years ago when that required it.
If Bruce is saying we're seeing aging buildings, that have got faults, they maybe could do something to rectify them, but owners are probably reluctant to put in the money to pay for it. How are the insurers going to deal with situations like this? What happens next? Did we just see another round of premiums going up and then the status quo staying the same? Or we're going to see more insurers refusing to insure in specific buildings?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question because the government is now picking up cyclone risk through the cyclone reinsurance pool. They collected $200 million from Southeast Queensland to cover this event, and it's been running for 3 years, and the claim is $1.7 billion, and it could have been a lot higher if it was a Category 2 that crosses across the coast. I think I think that there are roles to play for everyone. One of the things I'm doing on my Australian consumer insurance lobby side is we're trying to get more government-funded mitigation spending. I know, for example, in Northern Australia or North Queensland, the government has released a program for cyclone resilience for strata buildings. So I think I certainly believe that there is a role for all parties. I think that owners themselves need to take some responsibility for this. You can't, but at the same time, you can't mitigate all losses. But you're right, Will, that there is potential for more frequent high loss claims of this nature in cyclone. And it will be very interesting to see how this plays out with premiums and so on. But I've had a meeting with the Reinsurance Pool Corporation this week, and what their aim is to have steady premiums that are priced, or that their cyclone reinsurance rate is priced to be a stable long-term price as opposed to having major fluctuations.
He's put a huge amount of money into insurance premiums. Would we be better off putting this into the buildings themselves? The premiums, it's a cycle that the insurers get their money and they take their profits out, and some people get paid back and some people don't. And what seems to happen to me is a lot of money goes out of the buildings, but not very much money goes into it. Do we need to really start reconsidering where this money is going? Because I don't think that just spending a lot more money on increasing premiums is helping the buildings in any way.
Yeah. I agree. I would agree with that. I think that if on a large scale, strata buildings could spend more on maintenance, it would help everyone in reducing premiums. If you've only got, a handful of buildings within Southeast Queensland or Australia maintaining, then obviously that's not going to impact premiums. So I think, yes, a greater push for more resilience and more proactive maintenance would definitely help the cause for consumers around Australia.
I mean, Nikki, I would probably say that we need to start considering that the basic idea of sinking fund plans has completely failed. It's not resulting in better buildings. It's not resulting in resilient buildings. It's not resulting in well-maintained buildings. We need to rethink what we're doing and how owners put money into these buildings and how they're maintained. Personally, I'd probably prefer it if there were more, mandated cost inputs into the buildings than are currently required of owners. The current system's really not producing long-term healthy buildings.
What steps can the body corporate take to protect their interests when owners don't maintain unknowingly or otherwise their lots and their actions or emissions affect common property? How can we mitigate our risk, especially in regard to potential insurance claims? What documentation should the body corporate keep to prove this?
Yeah, it's really hard. There's a legal requirement that owners maintain their property in good condition, but the enforcement of that legal requirement is extremely weak. And if the body corporate does try to put it back onto owners, then it can be a very long, expensive, and complicated legal process when it does try to force owners to take an action. That's not a good way to do business. If buildings are concerned, I would suggest they should probably be having more frequent building inspection reports, perhaps every 3 years or something like that, including inspections of all internal areas of common property that owners may be responsible for, so specifically balconies and that kind of thing. At least then you could start compiling records of areas of the building that were well maintained and areas of the building that weren't maintained. But yeah, simply having that record in and of itself is a good start point, but doesn't really give you that power to force an owner to take an action. It can be quite difficult. But if you're concerned, start with those inspection reports.
And Bruce, would you agree with that?
Absolutely, Nikki. Inspection reports that then morph into maintenance plans. So what's critical is taking the information out of those reports and generating, I think I'd mentioned it on another podcast we did, but generating into short, medium and long-term planning for what needs to be done on that building. And granted, there are some things you might not need to attend to every year or 2 years. It could be even 10 years, but it is critical that 10-year point, they are addressed. Because simple things like even coatings on buildings, by not replacing that coating doesn't just damage the coating, it could then damage the render and other things behind that, and it exacerbates the problem. All of a sudden you've got a problem that's way more expensive than just a coat of paint. It's other things as well, and that's often where we see things go wrong, is not addressing things on that regular basis. So absolutely, yeah, I think maintenance plans are critical, and there is certainly a lack of that in the industry at the moment, or in the strata sector. There's a little bit of a lack there. I think a push on that would be certainly beneficial for owners.
And at the moment, I mean, this is a Northern New South Wales and Southeast Queensland webinar, but are you seeing that across the country, would you say?
Absolutely, yeah. And look, I must point out, we've had association with some buildings that have done it very, very well, and it's clearly evident what it's done to the building, because we'll go there for some minor issue and look at the rest of the building and go, wow, this is really well maintained, all of the key things are functioning well, the lifespan is going to be extended. So something can be taken from that, because it without a doubt does make a difference to buildings, and it often links back to committees and how proactive they are. So somehow getting that messaging is critical in my view to help owners mitigate costs further down the track.
Okay. And just a really quick question from chat. Someone's asking what kind of engineer would do such a general risk inspection report, and how do you find them?
Oh, good question. Look, there's a lot of, certainly a lot of businesses. Sedgwick are one of many that do inspections on buildings. It's kind of what we do. So certainly, you know, we're happy to help, but there's lots of businesses that do that. What's important when a maintenance plan or an inspection is done is to get some cost indications as well. Potentially, if there's quantity surveyors involved as well, they can give some cost planning advice. So what they might be able to do is map out that short, medium and long-term plan to help the owners budget for what potentially might come up in cost to address those maintenance problems. And that to me is critical, because it all feeds back into the sinking fund and the funds that are put together for these various things, which is important. Owners aren't caught off guard in 5 years for something that was could have been foreseen 5 years previous.
Okay, thanks so much. And Tyrone, you had something to add to that?
Yeah, can I just recommend to all buildings, please, if you have a voluntary maintenance inspection report, the best time to get them is after your insurance policy has renewed, because you don't have to disclose that to the insurer until the policy comes due for renewal. Okay, it gives you a lot more airtime to deal with those maintenance issues than if we get a maintenance report that was commissioned 2 months before the renewal and there are some issues and problems. Also, a good time to get these reports is when your sinking fund is looking healthy as well. All right, so but by all means, insurance shouldn't stop you from maintaining your property, but there are some considerations in that piece.
Okay, thanks, Tyrone. And Will, I'll jump to you, but and I might just ask you, I know I've heard you discuss this before, but the importance of having a healthy sinking fund and funds to call on in these kinds of situations. Maybe you could address that at the same time as you're responding to Tyrone.
The buildings that have money in the bank are currently experiencing a lot less stress than the buildings that don't. I don't know if I can put it much more simply than that. But if you at least have your funds in reserve and you have a healthy sinking fund, and the worst happens, you're able to take immediate action and deal with it. If you don't, then you're having to deal with not just the problems caused by the cyclone, but you're having to deal with also issues of raising money and everything like that. And it all becomes very complicated and you rarely get a positive outcome. I do have a question for Tyrone. Sorry, I know we're getting to the end. I'm just going to squeeze it in. Are insurers rewarding good buildings? By which I mean, you know, if you have a building that's doing the right thing, that's doing inspections, that's undertaking the repairs, are they seeing positive results back from insurers in terms of lower premiums? I'm just going to say my personal experience is no, but
Yeah, look, this is a great question. So the first answer is the way they reward them is through claims history. All right. So a well-maintained building will typically have lower claims and they don't apply loadings. The insurer's current approach is not to reward well-maintained buildings, but to penalize poorly maintained buildings. That's their approach. I spoke to the CEO of a major insurance company at a recent event about this very issue, that you can have two buildings, one that proactively maintains their property and goes and gets these inspection reports and has a couple of issues, and the insurer will penalize that, whereas the same building with the same problem, with a less proactive committee, doesn't have any reports. There's no, you know, that's a worse risk profile than a proactive committee. And I think that the question was very sidestepped by the insurer, because currently the insurers are not, I think that they can do a little bit more when it comes to being, you know, for buildings that proactively maintain their property. There was some discussion about this, and insurers are kind of moving towards that, but right now, as I say, it can cost a building if they proactively get a report and there are issues that are found in that. It can cost an insurance. Yeah.
Yeah, personally, I feel disincentivized by the insurers to kind of push the buildings that we manage to do something better, because I feel like we don't get the reward back when we're doing the right thing, which is a real negative situation to be in.
Yeah, so I would agree with that, and I would implore the insurance industry to look at this issue, if I can use this platform, to really look at this issue and find ways of not penalising proactive buildings. And a good example would be, if you've proactively got this report, we're going to give you the airtime to fix the issue, but if it comes up at a claim, that's where we might start penalising you. So that's a very good point, Will, and I agree with you 100% on that one.
At this point, I always like to go back to our panelists and just ask if they could leave us with their final thoughts. So Tyrone, maybe if you've got some final thoughts to leave everybody with.
Yeah, I think the best final thought, please be patient. Please be patient. I know that strata managers, insurance brokers, repairers, assessors, they're all doing their very best, and there's always probably someone that's in a worse off position to you. So please understand that there is going to be some inconvenience, but everyone is working to their best to get your claims finalised and settled.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Tyrone. And Will?
Patience, yes, but invest in your building. Do the preventative maintenance. Make sure that the next time there's a cyclone, which might be, in 12 months' time, 18 months' time, 5 years, we don't know. Make sure you're prepared and ready for that. Your building is up to scratch at that point. Don't wait for the insurers to bail you out.
Yeah, because I think at this point it's just about waiting for the next event to happen more than it will never happen again. Okay, and Bruce, any thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Oh, look, I think absolutely maintenance. It's my passion, and I'd love to see people embrace that more. To protect your asset, always remembering it is your asset. It's not just your home, it's an investment, and putting money into it is not dead money. It needs to be done to maintain. And I think just in terms of the cyclone communication, we talked previously about body corporate managers and building managers. I think the communication there is critical, because for the assessors and the consultants and the people who come out on site, there's a huge difference when you arrive on site and things are organised and owners are notified and it's not a surprise, and things will happen a lot quicker for you if you open up that communication channel and preferably have single points of contact rather than having lots of owners all contributing various opinions. It does make it a lot more complicated.
If you gained value from this video, please hit like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're looking for information about parking, strata insurance, defects and more, head over to lookupstrata.com.au or sign up to our free weekly newsletter via the link in the description box below.